want to take this chair over here? Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all out there. I'm so fortunate I get the opportunity to interview such a legend. And we've had so many chats leading up to this. We're like, how can we just talk for 15 minutes? Oh my gosh. So let's jump in.
Let's go.
Yeah, no time to waste. Exactly. Well, Tom did such a great introduction that really represented the scope of your work and how long you've been doing this. And one of the things, even though many of us are in black, it's such a bright time for human health and dietary supplements. And you've talked about this time as being a really transformational period. And the fifth phase is the term you've used of dietary supplements. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, first of all, Jessica, what you've done here is nothing short of brilliant. I was so energized by your opening presentation yesterday. And I think you set the context for what we all really need, some kind of emotional bonding, some kind of collegial understanding that we have shared common values about survivability and about the future and about legacy. And it's a real privilege to be with you here on the stage this afternoon with this group. So for me, it goes back obviously 50 years. I've been at since Expo 1. Doug Green and I actually worked on the development of the education programs for the first Expo. So I've been able to watch this industry now, community, grow up. And I think we're in a really interesting phase because with regard to the vitamin supplement sector of this industry, it's been through what I call 4 kind of preparatory phases. And the first was filling a gap. That's where it started. In bad American diet, you had nutrition gaps, so you fill that with supplements. Then the next phase was really vitamin C and the common cold. Linus Pauling built this whole concept then that we should be taking higher doses of certain nutrients to promote certain kinds of health. And so the vitamin C revolution really birthed the dietary supplement industry. That's phase 2. Phase 3 then is we went into a phase where people started to say, hey, you know, these supplements that we're using cut across more than just vitamins and minerals. There were all these other accessory nutrients, and I recall in 1982 I did a kind of a media tour around essential fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids. This was during the Pritikin era. It was pretty hard to sell people on fat when we were in the low-fat communities in the early 80s. And then from there we moved into this next phase, phase 4, which was the nutrigenomic period, where people started to look at individualization, the whole portfolio of different supplements with different clinical conditions, felt states, and started to see how we could improve functional outcome in individuals. And now we're in stage 5. And stage 5 to me is extraordinarily empowering. In fact, I'm still so appreciative of being involved with this field still at stage 5, because stage 5, I call it the epigenomics era, in which we start to, for the first time with good science and no dispute, recognize that nutrients can imprint the cells of even older age individuals in such a way as to regulate how their genes express themselves. So we're not locked into the bad news of just the way the sperm met the egg in the original set of our gene book of life, that we are actually able to modulate how that gets expressed by the things that we do every day. And part of that are the nutrients that we're exposed to and how they influence in genes that are going to regulate our function. And you know, for us, my focus right now is on the immune system, because it turns out that the immune system turns over about every 120 days. So the question is, will the cells 120 days from now be as good, worse, or better than the ones they're replacing? And we have that opportunity every 120 days to kind of send messages to our immune system that we want our cells not to be senescent in age, but to be young and vital. How do we do that? That's the new discoveries in the field of immunonutrition, immunosenescence, and immunorejuvenation. That's where we're focusing, because it's an upstream message for the downstream influences of the whole body.
It's so amazing how you articulate those different phases and how they each have built on one another. I know so many of us say, like, so much has happened over the past, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but you've distilled that into these really critical chapters for the supplement industry. And you talked about the individual and how not the final chapter, but the fifth chapter, the fifth phase that we're in, is really about understanding the individual. And so much of your work has been around personalization before anyone was even talking about that. So where do you see personalized health solutions going?
Yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing that up, because for years, people who have come to my education programs have said, Jeff, you have this kind of enlightened view of where the future might be, but we're not really to the future. We're still in a different phase because we can't scale this idea. We can't scale personalization. It's too much time, N of 1, to do individual treatment. So we're still in kind of the massification model, which is really public health and community studies and the way the drugs are done. The way drugs are developed are around population statistics.
Yeah.
So then we look at a group of people with a specific diagnosis. We then develop a new to nature molecule that influences that condition, and then we look at a broad range of people, soup to nuts, and then we see what outcome we have, and is it safe enough that people won't kill themselves taking it, and we do it, and we call it the medicine for the average. But then we find out that actually the population of people that need those medicines are not average. They're all uniquely different. And there has been the kind of the problem of what we call adverse drug reactions, or, for instance, some of the major drugs, let me use the TNF-alpha blocking agents for autoimmune diseases. People are not aware that the number to treat to get a positive outcome from these drugs that cost $30,000, $40,000 a year, the number to treat of over every 100 people you treat, only about 30 of those 100 people have positive outcomes. So you might say, well, hold it just a minute. How can you approve a drug that only works in 30% of the people for which it's diagnosed? Because those people that do respond very well. So it weighs the statistics enough to get you over the P05 level of evidentiary support. Now that's a different kind of healthcare than we're talking about. One at a time, each individual. How does you maximize and optimize that ability of that person to function? And now we're at a point in our history where we actually have the tools to scale this. Here I am with my Oura Ring and my Apple Watch, and I'm 24/7, 365 learning about my body, the first human race that ever had that ability. That all goes up to the cloud. It comes back to me in some information. It guides me about intelligent decision making. What we're going to be seeing is this whole informatic revolution, this whole AI revolution is going to take this vital information, it's going to recast it in ways that we don't have to become physiologists or anatomists, but we can benefit from that information coming back to direct us as to how to personalize. That's scalable. That's the force of change that this industry is going to realize over the next few years.
What needs to happen in order for it to be truly democratized? That's a question that, and you talked about scalability, like how do we take that from, and as we saw yesterday, a large quantity of people are using wearables and understanding their personal health, but it isn't quite there in terms of everyone using it. What needs to happen and how can this industry help?
Yeah, so this is another conversation I've had with many, many people over the years. As you might imagine, a great portion of my life is my leg and my intellect is over here in the traditional medical world. And so I get all these questions, these like I'm the critic, I'm critically reviewed. And so they would say something like, so are we talking about like 100 years from now that this transition is going to occur? And so I bring up to them things that are obvious that often we take for granted. Like in 1982, I built an Altec computer as a hobby. It was the first microcomputer. It was the predecessor to Steve Jobs and Wozniak building the first Apple computers. And when I would talk about this, I recall my son at the time was in the 5th grade, and we did a little program for a science project for him, and it was like really magic that you could use this computing power to do some statistics. But no one ever thought they were going to need a computer. In 1982, well, that's just for geeks. Now, we can't imagine a world today, right? Everything we do is controlled by chips. And so this construct that, if you can imagine it can happen is really an important thing right now, because we're in a revolutionary time of exponential growth in how these concepts get incorporated. I mean, just look at AI alone. And now I'm running, a friend of mine said, Jeff, are you using just one AI program? I said, well, yeah, I'm just learning how to use that as a tool. He said, oh, well, that's like primitive. He said, you need to take the answer from one AI program and run it through a second AI program, take the answer from that and run it through a third AI program, which is what I'm doing. And now we have this iterative body of knowledge that when you finally get something coming out the other side, it represents trillions of data points upon which you're going to be making a more informed understanding. So all these things are happening in real time. And what I think this industry is starting to recognize is that we can marry the beauty of the natural world, the mystery of nature. It's why we're into rock regenerative agriculture with our Himalayan Tartary buckwheat now, is because we want our hand in the soil. We want to understand the soil microbiome. We want to understand how it influences the through line of a healthy planet, healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy us. But all those things are interconnected. And now we have the tools actually to be able to put those things together into comprehensive strategies that deliver improved value without giving over the reason that this industry has been birthed some 50 years ago.
So in terms of those comprehensive strategies and what people actually do with the data, we're seeing so much more blending of pharmaceutical worlds, dietary supplement, and food and beverage. What do you see as next for this sort of intersection of all of those industries?
So let's look at GLP-1, right? That's on the top of everyone's mindset right now. So we published our first research paper on GLP-1 22 years ago. I can't believe it when I think back how quickly time's gone by. And we kind of brought to our practitioner world the concept of intra-endocrine hormones. Everybody goes, what's an intra-endocrine hormone? And we started talking about the fact that the GI mucosa is lined with antennae that are receptors that pick up information from our diet and signal in the release into the blood of these hormones that are members of that family. GLP-1 is only one. GIP is another. Somatostatin. I mean, I could go through the list. Let's just say there are a whole variety of these hormones that are produced by the signal from our diet that's picked up by the gut and then produces these responsive hormones, of which GLP-1 is one. And it turns out for GLP-1, it's the L cells in the distal ileum in the small intestine that has the receptor, the antennae, on the surface of that cell to pick up information from the diet. And what are the information molecules in the diet that do this? They're bitter tastins. Bitter tastins that are part of the TAS2 receptor site, because it turns out that L cell receptor for GLP-1 is the same on your tongue as the receptor for bitter. So we then think about what kind of diets have people eaten that live in the blue zones? They eat diets that have all sorts of complex taste profiles, spices and red and orange and green and blue colored foods that have these flavonoids that stimulate these receptors that then are associated with bitter taste receptors that then modulate naturally this process that we now have invented, which has not been just recently invented by the pharmaceutical industry, which is GLP-1 agonists. Now the difference is the pharmaceutical GLP-1 agonists are modulated molecules that have sustained ability to have the signal of GLP-1 staying in our body for a week at a time. What happens if you eat naturally a GLP-1 and a bitter food? It could be bitter melon, for instance, or it could be hops, or it could be Tartary buckwheat. These all are known to stimulate the GLP-1 agonists. So what happens in that case naturally is that the GLP-1 is released into the blood. It stays in the blood for about a half an hour, and then there's another enzyme in our body called DPP4 that kind of releases it, gets rid of it. So why does the body do that? I mean, it's pretty intelligent, isn't it? Why does it make something and get rid of it so quickly? Maybe it has a master understanding of how these work that we don't when we make a synthetic derivative that stays in our body for a week at a time. So all these things become part of, let's not rely upon synthetic biology to create a natural process. Let's find a way to augment, to parrot that, and let's get people to understand how to modulate their body's function by the things that have been the tenets of natural foods revolution for 50 years.
Yeah, I think that's such an important, oh, I heard some cheer. Okay, yeah, let's go with it. Why not? Yes, and I think that's such an important topic. I love your angle on that. And we did have a session on GLP-1s yesterday. If you missed it, definitely check it out on demand because it was a great session. And I'm sure we could have a million follow-up questions on that. But since we're running out of time, I do want to ask you, you were at, I think, the first Expo West ever?
Yeah. So Doug Green, and let me just give a shout out to Doug Green, who started this brilliant idea through New Hope Communications, that he moved from New Hope, Pennsylvania to Boulder. And I have had the privilege of having Doug as a dear friend. He's a genius, entrepreneur. I think anyone that's known him would call him in a class of his own. And his concept when he put this together was, let's blend the best of education with the best of business sense, and let's create an entrepreneurial investment-worthy enterprise that can grow this up and transform commerce in the United States. And the organic movement was born out of this, and there's so many things I could bore you to tears that went on over the years. But the key principle of all of this from the very beginning is the marriage of authentic information that was timeless, that could then pass through, that would shape the destiny of this new emergent industry. And the word science is an interesting word. It comes from the Latin scio, which means to know. So how do we know? We can know in many different ways. We can know by observation. That's the traditional Chinese medical model of thousands of years of history of observation to produce a knowing. And then there is Western kind of science, cause and effect, detailed interventional kind of trials. All this comes into a body of information that gives authenticity and gives an understanding of the reality and the value proposition of this form. And that's why we at our Big Bold Health Group are so excited about taking traditional certified agriculture, regenerative agriculture, applying it to a 3,500-year-old food, Himalayan tartary buckwheat, move it into the United States, get the most dedicated farmers who are growing this for the first time in the history of our country, and then make this available with the science that we are able to show. We just finished a clinical trial that we published showing that in 90 days of taking those nutrients, we could mark the immune system such that it slowed the rate of immune system aging by 47%. That's never, ever been shown before in any other human clinical trial. So the power of science coupled with the power of nature and the discovery process is the emergence of the 21st century of the natural products industry.
How incredible that you were at the first expo. Now you're here, 45 years later, 44 years later with Big Bold Health. You're up in the North Hall, which is where all the innovation is happening. And you keep breaking down barriers and doing new things. And I just think that's so remarkable. And we all need more of you in our lives, and thank you so much. I mean, thank you for doing this work, and I love how you're always asking questions and pushing. You said you've been having a lot of epiphanies here at this expo. What's one epiphany that you've had that you think is really about the future of this industry?
Well, I think the epiphany, and by the way, come visit us at booth 816. We'd love to see you if you would stop by and see our tartary buckwheat stuff. But I think for me, it's the reconfirmation that the heart and soul of what has been the germ seed of this industry, that people like Sandy Gooch and Steve Demos and Tony Harnett and John Mackey, and I could go on the names of the founding people in this industry, has been preserved. The people come up that are new to the industry, they're wide-eyed, they're receptive, they want to know more, they want to be present, they want to be around as a sustaining force of change. That is really, I'm having my 79th birthday this month. That's really kind of very powerful advocacy for the next 20 years. So
I feel like we should all sing you happy birthday, but we're out of time. So
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thanks,
Jessica,
everyone.
Thank you.